guys, we are back for chapter 16 of book Scavenger. The last chapter was very telling. We learned that Mr. Griswold has a lot of crazy fans, and for a second Emily was questioning whether or not she's kind of cuckoo for Mr. Griswold, but I think, personally, I think that Emily has found Mr. Griswold's next game. I don't think it's like, I don't know. I don't think she's seeing something in nothing. I think she actually has found it. I don't know. That's my opinion. I hope she's found something because it sounds pretty great. All right. Here we go. Chapter 16. Jack is about to show them something exciting. Something else exciting at Bayside Press. So here we go. Emily and James scurried out of the conference room after Jack. The hallway opened to a large space filled with cubicles, the hum of computers, the rustle of papers, and a few low voices. A woman sat at a long table with 2 stacks of paper in front of her. Emily recognized what she was doing from watching her dad work. She was proofreading a book. One stack of papers was a copy-edited manuscript, basically a printout from a computer file that had been marked up in colorful pencil with a bunch of edit marks. Long rectangular sheets made up the other stack. Her dad called them proofs. They showed the book as it would look when it was published, with the pages printed side by side on each rectangular sheet. The proofreader ran her finger from edit mark to edit mark across the manuscript pages and then checked the other stack to make sure all the edits had been made in the almost a book version. Emily had seen her dad do this sort of work dozens of times, but now she was surrounded by everything Griswold. It sparked an idea. The collection of Poe stories Hollister had given her included the gold bug. So why not compare that gold bug against Griswold's? Maybe if she checked word for word, she would uncover more typos or something else that would help her solve the puzzle once and for all. The idea put a little hop skip in her step, and James looked over, a questioning smile on his face. "Do you know what he's going to show us?" he whispered. "No, I'm just glad we came here, that's all." After leading them through a maze of cubicles, Jack slowed in front of one and said, "That's my space." There were dog photos tacked behind his computer and some of the same editing books Emily recognized from her dad's shelves that sat next to a bobblehead collection. But it was his name on the place card that really caught Emily's attention. "You're Jack Kerouac? You're my dad's favorite author. We named our minivan Sal after one of your characters." She wouldn't have guessed Jack would be this young, and from her dad's description, she hadn't pictured him as someone who wore Argyle. Jack blushed. She needed to have Jack sign something. "Do you have a pen?" In her excitement, she'd forgotten she was wearing her backpack. She unzipped it and dropped the gold bug inside so her hand was free to dig for a pen. "I'm not the Jack Kerouac," Jack explained, "not the one who wrote On the Road. He passed away decades ago. My mom was a fan of the beat poets, and she made my name legally Jack Kerouac in homage to my father, who was involved in the movement himself. Not that he knew I existed, my father, I mean, although the original Jack Kerouac wouldn't have known I existed either, of course." Jack fiddled with his collar. "Your mom gave you your own first and last name?" James asked. "You can do that?" "It was the 60s, Jack said, as if that explained it. "It served me well, though. Mr. Griswold got a kick out of it. I think part of the reason he hired me was so that he could tell people Jack Kerouac worked for him. Come on, what I want to show you is right behind us." They turned to a closed set of double doors. Jack jiggled a key in a lock, then opened them to reveal an enormous room decorated in burgundy and silver blue, just like the lobby. Mr. Griswold's office. Emily knew it at first glance. Windows spanned the far side of the room, showing a view that encompassed the ferry building and the bay beyond. Bookcases lined the walls and were filled with books, of course, but also a variety of games and puzzles and toys. A miniature Ferris wheel, a chessboard with the pieces placed mid-game, a large wooden elephant assembled with carved wooden pieces. Something whirred and tick-tocked at an uneven pace, and Emily finally zeroed in on a glass case with a structure inside designed to keep marbles perpetually moving up in buckets, downsides, and around sprockets. I think that's it. Emily could envision Mr. Griswold roaming this room, flipping through his book and playing with his toys. Something moved in her peripheral view, and Emily turned to see an actual man standing there, scanning the titles of the bookcase along the entrance. For a fleeting, hopeful second, before she got a good look at him, Emily thought it was Mr. Griswold himself. But then Jack said sharply, "What are you doing in here?" The man held his battered briefcase in front of himself, almost protectively. His sweaty dome was crisscrossed with long strands of ginger hair, and his suit was rumpled. The man practically leaped forward and extended a hand. Leon Remora, so sorry if I started you. I work with Mr. Griswold at his home, not here at Bayside Press. But I have his keys, you see. Mr. Remora held up a ring of keys and jangled them. I'm a rare book collector. I work for Mr. Griswold. I said that already, didn't I? Well, I'm trying to locate one of his missing books, and when he and I last spoke before Mr. Remora twirled his fingers in the air, searching for words. Before what happened, the man pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and mopped his face with it. Mr. Griswold told me he left it in his office, this book I'm looking for, and since I have access to his keys, with his permission, of course, I came here to retrieve it. Jack's arms were crossed now, and he studied Mr. Remora the way you might an abstract painting. And you locked the door behind you because... Did I do that? I don't recall doing that. Are you sure they don't automatically lock? No, they don't. Well, I must have locked it out of habit. Absent-minded and all that, you know. Mr. Remora tapped his skull with his index finger. Did you find the book you were looking for? Jack asked. No, but if I could just look a little bit longer. I'm sorry, but no, Jack said. We aren't allowing anyone in here. Mr. Remora's puppy dog pleading eyes darkened. Aren't children anyone? He said. That's enough, Mr. Remora. Jack clapped his hands. You've had your chance to look over these books. If you need more time, you'll need to make an appointment, and perhaps someone can assist you. But I'm his book collector. I should have full access to the books in his office. Mr. Remora, you might manage his personal collection, but you have no business here. Now, please, don't make me call security. Jack stepped back, prompting Emily and James to move with him. Mr. Remora strode past, dabbing his handkerchief around his neck and not making any eye contact whatsoever. Once Jack had watched the man walk out of view, he turned back to Emily and James. Sorry about that, guys. He put a damper on my fun surprise now, didn't he? Jack flourished his arm and said, I give you Mr. Griswold's sanctuary. A sculpture of a man's head sat in the front of the expansive windows, and thanks to the small illustration on the cover of a short story collection Hollister had given Emily, she recognized it immediately. Is that Edgar Allan Poe? She asked. Impressive, Jack said. It is indeed. Mr. Griswold had a special affinity for his work. You could say that again. Oh, here's the statue of Edgar Allan Poe, so now you all know what he looks like. Jack looked quizzically at James, but Emily spoke up. He's a fan of his, then? Big time, Jack said. Well, that solved one mystery, at least. Emily thought. Emily and James had puzzled over why Mr. Griswold chose Poe for his name. Why is Poe wearing a necklace? James asked. The statue wore a golden pendant in the shape of a rabbit. The rabbit had an elaborate scroll work making up its middle, and bells hung off its feet. Oh, you can kind of see it in this picture. It's kind of hard to see even in person, but there it is. Hopefully you can see it. One of Mr. Griswold's most prized possessions, Jack said. You've heard of the hunt for the golden hare? Emily and James gave him blank looks. Of course you haven't. That was a silly question. Your parents were probably as young as you then. What was it? James asked. Were people searching for a wig spun out of gold? Jack laughed. Not hair. He threaded his fingers through his bangs and tugged. He pointed to the necklace. A hare, a rabbit. This was in the 70s. An eccentric artist and a publisher worked together to create a book called Masquerade. It was a picture book with clues hidden in the illustrations. If you solved the clues, they led you to a buried treasure. The necklace you're looking at, to be precise. Mr. Griswold wasn't the one to find it originally. He bought it in an auction several years ago. Clues hidden in a book that led to buried treasure? That was similar to the Goldberg story and what they had guessed the game would be. This had to be what Mr. Griswold had planned. Emily gently stroked the golden hair necklace, trying to mask her excitement as best she could, but inside she was jumping up and down. The treasure hunt became something of a phenomenon, Jack continued, but it bombed when the clues proved to be too difficult. It took 3 years, and in the end, the person who found the treasure cheated, but it spawned a whole genre called armchair treasure hunts. Mr. Griswold loved this bit of publishing lore. To him, the rabbit represents how one idea, whether it's a book or a game or something else, can capture the fascination of so many people at once to the point where a community is built up around it where nothing existed before. Like book Scavenger, Emily said. Jack paused, head cocked to the side, and thoughtfully nodded as he considered this. Yes, exactly. Mr. Griswold would have been thrilled to hear you say that. Emily smiled shyly at the golden hair. It thrilled her to know that. That is the end of chapter 16. So I don't know where we're going to be in the next chapter. Maybe Bayside Press. Maybe we'll be out of there. But I am so excited to find out. I will see you guys next time. Bye.